Senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you. I appreciate my colleague from Texas and his earnest desire to solve the problems in front of us. And I would say at the outset, the recognition over the last 8.5, 9 years of being in the Senate is that we have a problem that we need to solve, and I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But I think there's two important points that the American people expect us to pay attention to. One is what Reagan described as the shining city on a hill, and that people coming here make us better. There's no question about that. And that what he described was, what he wanted was, in 1986, was not all walls, like some people wanted, and not all doors, like some people wanted, but a wall with doors. And so there's two basic facts that confront us. One is that the rule of law is the glue that holds us together. And when we hear talk about the American people having confidence on whether or not we're going to enforce the rule of law, whether it's on immigration or any other thing, the very fact is that fabric that is holding this nation together is being stretched very thin right now. And the last thing we should do in an immigration bill is to stretch that fabric further in terms of the confidence of the American people in terms of the rule of law. And this bill and this amendment is full of holes as far as the rule of law is considered all throughout. My colleague from Texas outlined some of that. He also outlined the capability of waiving the border fence, waiving the requirements for RPI status. It's all written, but it's written so that the Secretary of Homeland Security can waive almost every portion of it. So that's not the rule of law, that's the rule of rulers. And whatever the rulers decide. One of my great disappointments in the Senate is that we too often don't follow regular order. And so this bill was put together, it went through the Judiciary Committee, but not once did it come through Homeland Security. Homeland Security, where Border Patrol, where ICE, where USIS, where all the implementation of anything that's in this bill will take place. Oh, and by the way, all the knowledge, all the experience of all the members on that committee for the last 10 or 12 years, with the exception of Senator McCain, was not utilized in putting this bill together. So what we have is some very good effort and well-intentioned effort by a lot of people to do some things. Let me just outline where they've got it wrong. And I will ask permission in a little bit. Actually, I'll ask it right now. The National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers, a letter denying the fact that we need 20,000 additional Border Patrol. Here's the people who know. And they say, how stupid is this? What we're doing is we're throwing money hoping it'll stick on a wall and hoping we can convince our colleagues that we've got a border security plan when in fact there's no border security plan in the United States today. And how do I know? Because 2 weeks ago I had breakfast with Secretary Napolitano and I asked her to send, she said she would, sector by sector border plan for the United States. And I got a 2-page letter that had nothing in it. So this isn't a new border plan. This isn't a specific border plan. The country doesn't have one right now. So we've put together, outside of the regular order, well-intentioned people trying to solve a problem to assure the American people that, in fact, we're going to secure our borders. Now, I will readily admit to you that if I lived in the poverty of some of the Central American nations, that I would make every effort on my part to get here, legally or illegally. Because the opportunity is here. That opportunity to improve yourself, that opportunity to work hard, that opportunity to live in a nation that has a justice system where the rule of law reigns supreme. The very irony of the fact that if I were from one of the Central American countries and came here, the very irony would be the fact that I'm going to break the law that is the very nurturing thing that gives the opportunity for me to advance for me and my family. I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the letter of the National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers.
Without objection.
Now, what has Senator Cornyn outlined that does not fit with common sense? He said that people who commit 3 misdemeanors, whether it be child abuse or spousal abuse or drunk driving, shouldn't be given an RPI status. Yet, under this bill, you can do that. And for those that are not familiar with courts of laws, it's on the date. So if you got 2 on one date, that only counts as 1. So theoretically, you could have 10 or 12 misdemeanors and still qualify for RPI status. How's that fit with the rule of law? How's that fit with the glue that holds us together? What that does is flaunt the rule of law. The other thing that I think is very problematic in this bill is we have 20,000 Border Patrol agents, but no increase in ICE agents, no increase in USCIS, which are the very people that are going to have to handle the 11 million people here who are going to get or progress to RPI status. So where's the money to handle 11 million people, additional people for ICE and USCIS? It's not in there. If, in fact, we want the rule of law to work, then we want the people who qualify under this bill for RPI status to do so under the rule of law, which means you have to investigate and do a background check and make sure that the documentation establishing them being here before December 31st of 2011, that in fact they do have residence here, that they in fact have worked here, and that has to be worked on. That can't just be a blanket, because the opportunists to take advantage of that system, if in fact there's no ICE agents and there's no USCIS agents to actually handle that, means that everything that's been set up in this bill will just happen without an investigation, without knowledge that it's a true and in fact people qualify for RPI status. The other side of the bill that Senator Cornyn made a point about, which I would like to expand upon, is the fact that we are not going to have an entry and exit visa system, because 80% of the people go through the land ports, and this bill exempts those land ports totally from that. And you heard Senator Cornyn talk about 40%, maybe even 50% of the people who are here illegally today came here legally. They came here legally with a visa. They qualify for a visa, and they've overstayed their visa. Well, if in fact we have no internal enforcement, no ICE agents to enforce the visa overstays, we won't change that. The CBO even said you're going to have 7.5 million new illegals come across, undocumented, come across under this bill. And if you have no internal enforcement, there's no way to drive that number down. And yet this bill puts the resources in the wrong place. You control a border by controlling the border based on what the situation is on the border, depending on location, geography, topography, and access. So throwing 41,000 Border Patrol agents across our southern border might work, but it's a tremendous waste of resources. It might be a jobs program. But the fact is it takes a combination of technology, fencing, Border Patrol, and the right combination for wherever we're talking about to be effective in operational control of the border. But that's not even a part of the bill. It's not part of the bill to have operational control of the border with 90% effective rate. And one of the reasons that we can't get there, which is one of the things that Americans would like to see us promise in this bill, is because our control of the border today is somewhere between 40 and 65%. That's opposite of what the Secretary of Homeland Security will tell you. But that's what the studies outside of government say when they go to interview those undocumented workers that are here today. And they did a very thorough analysis of that and said we're somewhere between 40 and 65%. So the basis of allowing undocumented workers and those that are in our country who can contribute greatly to our country, the basis of putting them on some type of status to move towards a green card status and ultimately citizenship has to be based on some real facts. Now, why would somebody not agree to 90% control of the border? The only way, the reason they would not agree to it is they don't think it's achievable. And the only reason it's not achievable is because we don't have the political will to do it. It is technically achievable. You can't get to 100%, but you could easily, with good leadership, good sector-by-sector planning, good internal enforcement, and great legal immigration, so you decrease the illegal, we could get there. Now, why is that not part of this bill? Is because the rule of law does not reign supreme in the U.S. Senate. Let me make a couple other points. One of the big holes in this bill, in Section 1202, grants the Secretary. It says the following: the Secretary shall initiate removal proceedings in accordance with Chapter 4 of Title II of the Immigration Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1221, confirm that immigration relief or protection has been granted or is pending or otherwise close to 90% of the cases of immigrants who were admitted to the United States as non-immigrants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All that means is she can waive the requirements under the bill. She can waive the fence. All throughout this bill, we're letting a non-elected individual with power to undermine every aspect of any tooth in this bill. You know, when the immigration debate started, my hope was that we would do the principle that most Americans want us to do, which is we need to solve the problem of the undocumented in this country. We need to bring them out of the shadows. But the price to do that is cogent and realistic control of our borders. And let me make a point. If, in fact, you don't have cogent and realistic control of your borders, and you do everything else in this bill, and everything works as the authors want it to work, guess who's going to be coming across the border? The very people we actually don't want here. The drug runners, the human smugglers, the criminals, the terrorists. So when I say 90% operational control of the border and I'm in Oklahoma, people look at me and they're askance. They say, well, that means 10% of the people are still coming. And guess what makes up that 10%? The worst of what tries to get into this country. So it's not just about getting a border security plan to secure a border. It's about limiting the access of the criminals and the terrorists and the worst from coming into our country. This bill's going to allow that to continue. It's not going to stop that. It will continue. And the only way, and I think Senator Cornyn's point, what you need is to take this out of the political arena. We need to make it so that the pressure is that we do what's best for America. And one of the things that's best for America is having a lot more people come here and contribute to our melting pot. There's no question about that. But we have to have it to where it's cannot be manipulated by whoever's in charge for political benefit. And that's why the Cornyn plan really is novel in terms of actually solving the problem. I'm not going to be here much longer, less than 3.5 years. But I can already predict what's going to happen if this piece of legislation comes through. My daughters and their husbands, 15 years from now, are going to be listening to the same debate on the Senate floor. The biggest deficit that the Senate has, in my mind, is failure to put teeth into things they know will actually fix the problems in this country. This bill has no teeth. This bill has $48 billion thrown up against the wall to buy the votes to say we're going to have a secure border, when in fact we're not. It doesn't mean we can't get a secure border. I worked for 2 weeks with my staff. I told Senator Schumer from New York, I'd love to try to do that, but in 2 weeks you can't do it. What you've done, you haven't done it either. And you've done it from a deficit of knowledge rather than using knowledge. You didn't use any of the significant historical staff on the committee of jurisdiction to help write this legislation. The institutional knowledge is not in it. It will not succeed. I don't know ultimately how I'll vote on this amendment, but I'm certainly not going to vote to proceed to this until we've had a chance, more than 72 hours, to actually work through and be able to ascertain and also share the flaws in the approach. For a third that amount of money, you could easily secure the border. And we're going to spend $48 billion. And in there is another jobs program adding to the 102 we have now at $1.5 billion. GAO has already said we need to redo our jobs program. What we have an earmark for another youth jobs program, and we won't even fix the youth job programs we have now. Madam Chairwoman, Madam President, I've been handed a note that others want to speak, and so I will yield the floor at this time.